Dear learners, today we are going to learn a very important part in linguistics which is called morphology. In morphology itself, we are going to take up its definition and scope. So to start with, as we know, everything depends on the language and we must know what exactly by definition the language is. So to defining the language, we can say that language is a defining characteristics of humankind, serving as a vehicle for thought, communication, and social interaction. At its core, language is built from words, units that encapsulate meaning, structure, and communicative power. When we say it reflects to the meaning, means it conveys a certain sense and it has some basic structure and that relate to the communicative power. But words are not indivisible entities. Rather, they are made up of smaller units and governed by rules that determine their form and meaning. This branch of linguistics that studies this structure is called morphology. In morphology, as we say, like this is part of the linguistic, which is the scientific and systematic study of language, which seeks to describe and explain its structure, use, acquisition, and evolution through objective methods and empirical evidence. And this has been given by many scholars, including Bloomfield, Chomsky, Crystal, Robinson, and many more, has defined the linguistics in this way. When we say systematic and scientific study, we mean linguistics uses empirical evidence. Empirical evidence, we mean it analyzes real language data, which may be spoken or written. We can say linguistics is systematic. By systematic, we mean it follows clear methods and principles rather than intuition alone. So it's based on the clear methods and have certain principles. We can also say that linguistics is objective. It seeks to describe and explain language without prescriptive judgment. It is not about good or bad language, it is about to explain without prescriptive in our own judgment. It seeks universals. Linguistics attempts to identify principles common to all human languages. So most of the linguists working in this area, they try to establish a common principles for all human languages. Then linguistics has the subfields that includes the phonetics, phonology, morphology, and syntax. These are the core branches of linguistics that we must study to have a clear-cut grasp over the language. When we say phonetics, phonetics basically examines the physical properties of a speech sounds. It focuses on how sounds are articulated, transmitted, and perceived. When we say it is articulated, means how we speak, how we produce the speech sounds. When we say transmitted, how these speech sounds are being transmitted from one person to another person. And when we say perceived, that perceived means how we receive those sounds as part of the communication system. So this study is known as phonetics. Whereas phonology studies the patterns and organization of sounds in a language. It focuses on understanding how a speech sounds function within a specific linguistic systems. So this is basically referring to a particular sounds in a particular language and its pattern and organization. This study is known as phonology. Whereas morphology is that branch of linguistics that deals with the words, their internal structure, and how they are formed. So the way it has been formed to convey the meaning at word level, which is also part of that we talk about morpheme as part of the morphology, that is the branch we are going to talk in detail about morphology. Then linguistics also covers syntax, the study of how words and morphemes combine to form larger units such as phrases and sentences. In simple way, we can say a study of sentences are known as syntax. Whereas semantics is the branch of linguistics that studies the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. In simple words, we can say a study of meaning is known as semantics. So these are the core branches of linguistics that is being covered to a study in linguistics in details. Today we are going to talk about the morphology. Morphology is the study of word forms, its internal structure. To go beyond to look at the internal structure, we also know what exactly the language is. To study morphology, like we need to know what exactly language is. So everything depends on the language and its structure. So language is derived from the Latin word lingue, which means produced with the tongue. So basically, we are going to learn more about this language in general, because all the learners may not be knowing the technicalities of the language and its sub branches. Now we are going to let you know exactly in a very simple way how we can understand language and how language is being formed in the form of words and phrases and sentences. A set of arbitrary vocal symbols through which an individual operates, expresses, and communicates in a society. So it is a social phenomena where we need to fulfill our communication needs, and for that, every individual they operates, expresses, and communicates to convey their feeling, emotions in the society with each other. Now, if we look at the characteristics of the language, it says language is arbitrary, language is social. When we say language is arbitrary, we are talking about language is random. When we say social, it's referring to its pattern in a society that is work. And language is systematic. It has a complete network, a system to organize in itself to convey a meaning. Language is vocal, verbal, and sounds. We know vocal, we know verbal, we know sounds, like about language is being spoken to make others to hear and understand the meaning of the sentences. Language is non-instinctive, conventional. Non-instinctive means like we cannot randomly put anything for any personal object. It is always non-instinctive and conventional. Language is productive and creative. Productive means it can produce n number of sentences so as it can create the similar number of sentences or utterances. Language is a system of communication. This is very well said and very well known definition of language, that is a system of communication through which we communicate, we share our feelings, emotions with each other. Language is human and structurally complex. When I say human being, always used language which may be simple or may be complex. So all these are the characteristics of a language when we talk about. So language is a uniquely human system of communication that uses structured sounds, words, and rules to express thoughts, convey meaning, and facilitate social interaction. It is both a mental faculty and a social tool, enabling the representation of ideas and the transmission of culture. So this is main part of the language that we can define or we can say or we can elaborate. But words are not indivisible entities. Rather, they are made up of smaller units and governed by rules that determine their form and meaning. When we say it is a smaller unit, we are talking about the minimal unit that has meaning and governed by certain rules. Based on certain rules, those are formed. Those rules, through the help of those rules, they form words and sentences and phrases. After knowing the language, our focus, the topic is morphology of Urdu and Hindi. So we must know some of the interesting fact about the language Urdu and Hindi. So Urdu and Hindi are two important languages of Indian subcontinent. Hindi is the official language of India, but region-wise, both the languages coexist side by side, mainly in the north, northwest, and parts of East India, though understood and spoken throughout the country. So we know Hindi and Urdu is also called as a lingua franca, very spoken, very popular to communicate our feeling, emotions throughout the country. The modern Indo-Aryan languages have developed from different Apabharamsas. From Sarseni Apabharamsa have developed Khariboli, Brajbhasa, Bangru, Kannauji, and Bundeli, together grouped as Western Hindi, whereas Avdi, Bagheli, and Chhattisgarhi together are known as Eastern Hindi. So these two dialects like Western Hindi and Eastern Hindi are important when we talk about the Hindi Urdu and its promotion and development. The word Hindi is used to include, besides these 8 languages, which are Bhojpuri, Maghi, Maithili, Rajasthani, Marwari, Malvi, and Mewati. These are the different dialects, or sometimes people call it languages, of Hindi. The source of Urdu is also Khariboli, the branch of Hindi spoken around Delhi and Meerut. Urdu assimilated words from Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, apart from a large number of words from native languages, including Sanskrit. So, Urdu has borrowed extensively from Turkish, Persian, and Arabic. So, we have a mixed kind of representation, and also from Sanskrit. So, it's a very rich in terms of vocabulary and in terms of usage in Urdu language. Grierson include Urdu as one of the two forms of Western Hindi, the Western and Eastern Hindi just we have spoken about. So Urdu and Hindi are two forms derived from the same source. Structurally, they are very close to each other. When we say structurally, like they have the similar grammar, only they are differ in vocabulary. So there has always been much debate about whether they are different or same languages. So people were always talking about when a common man's language is called Hindi and Urdu same, but when we go towards more in literary aspect, elite use of the languages, for Hindi we are going more towards Sanskrit, for Urdu we are going more towards Persian and Arabic. Though at the lower socio-cultural level, the two forms are almost similar, at a higher socio-cultural level, particularly where there has been little socio-linguistic contact in their standard forms, Urdu and Hindi show striking differences. In literary languages, we can say that Hindi is inclined more towards, in the sense of vocabulary usage, towards Sanskrit, whereas Urdu is inclined in terms of selecting the vocabulary more towards Arabic and Persian. This is true for all the linguistic level from phonology to semantics when we look at this. Hindi and Urdu languages have their origin in Khariboli, spoken in areas around Delhi. It was also known as Rekhta, which means mixed language, like that was the combination of different groups of languages, and they use vocabulary from different sources. So Hindi and Urdu have a common form known as Hindustani, which is essentially a Hindi-Urdu mixed language. In terms of vocabulary, they interchangeably used. Historical and cultural processes and the linguistic affinity which exists in Indian languages led to the emergence of Hindi-Urdu, or so-called Hindustani, as the lingua franca of major areas of India. When we say lingua franca, means more popularly known languages, spoken languages of that particular region. Due to a common structural basis, Hindi and Urdu continue to be treated as synonymous for centuries, at least up to the period of Ghalib. So it has been well said that Hindi and Urdu were considered as similar up to the era of Ghalib. Mirza Ghalib always called his language Hindi. On several occasions, though he used the Perso-Arabic script for writing it, but always referred to his language, the way he is used was called Hindi. Now, if you look at how morphology deals with, so morphology basically attempts to explain and accounts for how words are created in a particular language. So now we know the language, and in morphology, we know how words are created in a particular language. What is the appropriate form of a word given its location in a particular sentence? And what governs the use of correct form in a particular sentence. So all these understanding of words in a sentence in a particular language is part of the morphological study. Then why morphology is necessary for a linguist, for a language learner, or for a common masses to understand the word structure? It is because to get an accurate description of individual languages in a detailed manner, such as much as possible, we can search for patterns in human languages at the world level. So what are the patterns that are involved in making the words, combining the words together or morphemes together. Theorize and conceptualize how morphemes can be organized. Then we can understand the processes involved in word formation, what are the various steps of word formation, what are the various steps involved in forming the word. So these are the part of the morphological study and why we need this morphology. Also, other than these, the linguistic morphological knowledge can be used in other fields like language documentation, anthropology, and second language acquisition. In teaching, like ESL, cognitive scientists, language art teachers, and writers, they take much more advantage of morphology in expressing their ideas and emotions through various word formation processes. Coming to the morphology and its definition, defining the term, you can say morphology basically originates from Greek morphe, which means form, and logia, that is a study. So a study of form, in literal sense, we can say a study of word forms, how words are combined together is the study under morphology that we take up. The German poet and philosopher Johann Wolfgang von Goethe first introduced the term in biology to describe the study of form in living organisms. However, linguists later adapted the term to describe the study of the structure of words in linguistics. So there are several scholars throughout different decades. They have studied linguistics and they have referred morphology as the study of a structure of words. Defining morphology, Bloomfield said morphology is the study of the construction of words. Whereas Katamba said morphology is the study of the internal structure of words and the systematic covariation of form and meaning. So this definition of morphology by Katamba is clearly reflect that we look for the internal structure of words, how the words are being formed and how they convey the meaning. Wooji defined morphology is the study of the rules governing the formation of new words and modification of existing ones. So these are the definitions by scholars. These definitions share a common understanding, and those common understanding we can refer as morphology studies how words are formed, how they relate to one another, and how they function within language. The basic concept, basic idea for all the definition is referred to relate to one another and how they function within the language and how these words are formed by various processes. Morphology includes the study of how the words are formed, where they originate from, what their grammatical forms are, what is the function of prefix and suffixes in the formation of words, on what basis the parts of a speech of a particular language are formed, and how and why the word forms change. So there are several processes. For all these answers we are going to see in the next couple of minutes about in the morphology. The concept of morpheme is central to morphology. So first thing that we need to understand in morphology, the morpheme, which is the smallest units of meaning. So when we say smallest unit, we are talking about the minimal unit in any language. There are 2 basic and 5 secondary types of morphemes, and we will take up these types in detail in our next lecture. So free morpheme, bound morpheme, root morpheme, stem morpheme, derivational morpheme, inflectional morpheme, and the affixes that include prefixes and suffixes and sometimes also infix, depending which language we are talking about. Now, by definition, the Leonard Bloomfield first defined the morpheme as a linguistic form which bears no partial phonetic semantic resemblance to any other form, and which is a minimal unit of meaning or grammatical function. If you look at definition or any definition, we will find these 2 things very common, like minimal unit of meaning and also grammatical function. So this highlights the independence of morphemes such as cat and s in cat. If you look at this word, if I can write here, you can see we come to the morpheme. There are many scholars who has given the definition, and if you look at the Leonard Bloomfield, who defines a morpheme as a linguistic form which bears no partial phonetic semantic resemblance to any other form and which is a minimal unit of meaning or grammatical function. So in every definition we can find these 2 things, the minimal unit and grammatical functions. If you look at this word, if I am writing here for the sake of understanding, if I write cats, you will see that there are 2 things. One is cat as an independent, and then we have s, and s is a plural mark. Here meaning is plural. So if you look at this cats, it has 2 morpheme. So morphemes are cat and s, where each unit contributes distinct meaning or function. So each unit, cat is 1 unit and s is another unit, both having meaning. Cat has its own meaning and s indicates the plurality, that plural is also having meaning from singular to making it plural. So now if you look at the definition of Naida, who describes a morpheme as a minimal unit of form which has a specific meaning or grammatical function in the structure of language, that emphasizing its role in both meaning and grammar as seen in the word unhappiness with morpheme unhappy and ness. Here they have, say if you look at un is like prefix, then the root word is happy and the ness is the suffix, and all 3 morpheme has its own meaning and our grammatical function. So these are important to understand, and I know like most of the learners who are listening to my lecture must be aware about these small things by now, by all these definitions. If you look at Charles F. Hockett, who offers a related perspective stating that morphemes are the smallest individually meaningful element in the utterance of language, distinguishing between free morphemes like book and bound morphemes like s in the books. Here I would like to make clear to all our learners, when we say free and bound, a morpheme may be free or it may be bound. A detailed description will come later, but here just for the sake of under free means it can have an independent occurrence, can occur independently without any condition. Whereas bound is like here is S in the books, that S cannot occur independently. It has to take help some other morpheme for its use, for its occurrence, for anywhere. So at every stage that there are two kind of morpheme, one is free morpheme, one is bond morpheme. So free morpheme are free to occur anywhere without any condition, whereas bond morphemes has to occur in certain environment, certain conditions. J. Harris focuses on distributional properties, defining a morpheme as a class of forms or segment of forms which have a common meaning or function and which occur in mutually exclusive environment, such as the polar marker S and ES in cats and buses. So they have examples. If you look at for cats, they have used S. For bus, they have used ES, buses. So these are all polar marker and used in exclusive environment, mutually exclusive environment for making it plural. So this is the basic thing is that we are referring everywhere as a minimal meaningful unit. George Traeger underscores the contrastive role, noting that a morpheme is the smallest unit of a speech sound that has meaning or that distinguishes one utterance from another, as in the distinction between run and runs marked by S. So at everywhere, every scholar has used different examples but convey the same meaning, same structures. So minimal meaningful unit, when we say, it means we cannot further subdivide the word. For example, the Traeger used the word run. We cannot further subdivide this word run. If we divide, it is going to lose its meaning. So it cannot remain meaningful. By definition, for a morpheme, it has to be a minimal meaningful unit which cannot be further subdivided. So this is basically the idea of a morpheme, to have its meaning but should be a minimally understandable. Now Noam Chomsky connects morphemes to syntax, and we all know that Chomsky is more known for syntactic structure, describing them as the minimal element of language's syntax bearing semantic or grammatical information which combine to form words such as dog or ed in walked. So any representation with whether grammatical or semantic meaning, they are referred to as morpheme. Peter Matthew views a morpheme as an abstract unit of linguistic structure realized as a segment of form which contribute to the meaning or grammatical function of a word, accounting for variations like the plural morpheme realized as S or ES or vowel change from man to men. So they have examples of man that become men in plural formation, whereas the other plural marker are S or ES, and these are called as plural morpheme, and they have the grammatical function. Grammatical function means it is showing the plurality of that particular word or that particular morpheme. So these are all the definition of the meaning given by different scholars. So collectively, if you look at these definitions, which highlight morphemes as a fundamental units that carry lexical or grammatical meaning, function as building block of words. So we are combining different morphemes to form words and exhibit both concrete and abstract properties across linguistic contexts. Throughout the linguistic studies, these morphemes are always given the lexical meaning as well as grammatical meaning to describe the words in different contexts. If you look at these morphemes, like I am going to briefly touch upon these aspects as well, but more it will be elaborated in the next lecture when we talk about morph, allomorph, and morpheme in detail. So morpheme may be classified as a free morpheme, means, as I said earlier, can occur independently without any help, without any support. At any place in the sentence they can occur. However, bound morphemes cannot stand alone, must attach to other morpheme. For example, plural s, past tense ed, those cannot occur independently, so they are called bound morpheme. So learners, you may be clear by now, free morphemes are those morphemes which can occur freely. They do not need any help for its use, for its occurrence, whereas bound morpheme, by the term bound, is like they are bound to appear with the help of some other morpheme. So it cannot stand alone, it cannot appear by themselves, it must attach to other morpheme for its use to convey the meaning. For example, in English we have books. Book is a free morpheme, whereas s is a bound morpheme. Book can be used anywhere without any condition, whereas s can only be used as a bound morpheme to convey the meaning of plurality. Whereas unhappiness, if you look at un has three morpheme. By now we know un is prefix, happy is the base part or root part, and ness is the suffix, like is a changing, making a grammatical meaning for that. So unhappiness has three morpheme to convey the meaning, and here un and ness are considered as bound morpheme because un cannot occur independently, so as ness cannot occur independently because they convey certain grammatical meaning. Now with morpheme we need to know morph. So morph are the phonological, that is spoken, or orthographic, that is written forms to realize morphemes, and they are minimal carrier of meaning. So it is basically a spoken or written forms of to realize the morpheme or representation. We can say the representation of a morpheme into written or a spoken form are known as morph, or in other words we can say a morph is a formal unit with a physical shape, that it has a shape, it cannot appear without a shape. A phonetic representation of a morpheme is also called morph, and it is manifestation of a morpheme. So morph is also the manifestation of a morpheme. So you know that is mainly here we are talking about the physical shape. For example, if you look at cat and s, that combine to form word cats. So cat is a morph. And if you look, if I can give you an example, if you have the word like sheep, and if we use the word sheep as a plural, then we have a call 0 here. There is no plural marker here, but we still use sheep as a plural. So this here we have one morph but two morpheme, because sheep can be used in its lexical meaning as well as it can be used as a plural form. But the shape is one shape, convey two meaning, but we can say here only we have representing only one morph, not the two morphs. So because this shape is giving the meaning of plural also. So singular and plural. So this way morph is, we can say, is the physical shape of the morpheme. The alternative, the next is allomorph. So these three terms you must know very clearly: morpheme, morph, and allomorph. These are very related and very important to understand. The alternative representation of a morpheme is called allomorph. So alternative representation, what do we mean by alternative representation? Every language has its own unique way of pronunciation and in certain environments. If you look at the plural morpheme s, as in cats, when we make it cats, is pronounced as saw, as is given in the parenthesis. You look at here, this saw. And when we call cats, bats, rats, they give the sounds of saw. Whereas in dog, when we add this s to make it plural, is pronounced like z, as in dogs. We do not pronounce s, we pronounce z, but it remains still plural. Then we have the next one is es in horse. When we add s to the horse, making it plural, it gives the sound, the pronunciation as is. So If you look at cats, giving S, look at dogs, giving Z kind of pronunciation, and horses giving is pronunciation. These variations does not affect the meaning, but those variations are called the allomorph of the same morpheme. In the same way, if you look at the past tense morpheme the, which is in plant, when we make it past, plant, pronounce as the. When we pronounce asked, is pronounced like the. Here, this is the, and this the first one is the in plant, and added we pronounce id kind of thing. So this different pronunciation is the variation of the same morpheme without affecting its meaning. So these variations without changing the meaning are always known as allomorphs. So allomorphs are the variations of the same morpheme in different contexts, different environments without affecting its meaning. So I hope the learner by now we know morpheme, we know morph. Morph is a physical representation of the morpheme, whereas allomorph is the realization of various alternative representation of the same morpheme without the affecting its meaning. If you to have a basic understanding, I am not going to give you to look at this in detail right now, but basic diagram to represent the morpheme, you can say morpheme can be free or bound, can be lexical or functional, lexical and functional, functional referring to grammatical like preposition, conjunction, etc., lexical referring to the lexical items in dependent form, whereas bound morpheme is derivational and inflectional. Among derivational, we will be learning more in a minute. Then derivational, we have prefix, and in prefix, we have class maintaining and class changing. Class maintaining, we have same class of the grammatical category. A class changing is we need to change the class of the word or form or morpheme. So we will give you the examples of everything. Now we have suffix. Among suffix, we have class maintaining and class changing. So as inflectional morpheme also have suffix which has class, only class maintaining. So class maintaining will retain the grammatical form, grammatical category as it is. If it is sing, verb, singing, as it is same grammatical category. When we say singing, it is also verb, like sing, and if I add ing, it becomes singing. So singing and sing are both representing the same category. Now if you look at the word happy, if I add suffix happiness, then it changes the grammatical category from happy to happiness, it becomes noun. So when it is such class changing and class maintaining. So these two forms are very important to understand, and we will learn more in details in next couple of minutes.